Hello there friends and welcome for today's Rogue Trader guide. We have very exciting news as the newest patch 1.8.28 has just been released and it is by far the biggest patch yet, with loads of changes including bug fixes, quality of life improvements, and of course the classic nerfs and loss of balance changes for the first time. We'll of course focus into all the nice gameplay changes, but besides that, there's some other nice stuff. As you can see from the highlights, there's even more voice acting added to the game, for the prologue and companion banter and chatter. New visual effects and also icons, mostly for items and some abilities like the normal attack and cleave from Warrior with melee weapons. Performance improvements and optimization and some other nice stuff. But let's dive into the gameplay balance changes now. And I want to start with, honestly the biggest of them all, also a huge nerf to the officer class, as their Bring It Down ability, which provides an extra turn to any ally of choice, can no longer be applied to the same ally more than once per round. Let's take it step by step. Well, first, it is of course a nerf, but it's only truly noticeable at Act 1, at least if you're playing on the highest difficulty Unfair, for example. Because there your characters aren't really still at optimal power, you don't have a second archetype, not that many damage potential and so on. What this means is, essentially, you won't be able to, well, have one character like a dedicated sniper, fully buffed to the max, just snipe everything in one turn by stacking extra turns. This is no longer possible, so in a way, it's definitely a much bigger nerf to sniper characters. On the other hand, starting from the second act, which isn't really that late in the game, because there is when burst weapons start becoming really powerful, well, the reality is you only need one burst weapon user to get a single extra turn to start the pain train going. After firing your burst attack, even just a single one, you'll definitely be at high momentum, which gets the whole pain train started, including providing more extra turns to anyone through the officer's finest hour heroic action, which can still be applied on the same target multiple times per turn. Like I said, it's really only noticeable very early in the game, and definitely for sniper characters instead of burst chads, which are still quite OP, at least starting from chapter 2 of course. Also, don't forget you can still buff other party members with this, like for example Cassia, who is still as OP as ever. For a second officer nerf, you'll no longer get to generate momentum multiple times a turn by providing your allies with a bonus turn, which I think is intended because before, whenever you would get a bonus turn to an ally, for example through Bring It Down we just covered, when that ally's extra turn ended, it would swap back to the officer and you would still gain more momentum as if your turn had started again, no longer. Speaking about burst weapons, the Concentrated Fire Soldier ability, which can increase the damage of all area of effect attacks, will no longer apply to burst fire. Also something that was intended, I believe. Now it only works with true area of effect attacks like flamethrowers and melta guns, despite the fact burst, you know, hits an area of effect. For a direct Cassia the Navigator nerf, her special Perilous Way talent will now inflict less damage whenever you forcibly move enemies. Around pretty much half the damage because it is half your willpower bonus instead of the full amount. Honestly, this doesn't mean much. Cassia is still one of the best, if not the best, party member, easily. Her Lidless Stare main ability, for example, can still do enormous damage, and is also still very easy to increase her willpower by absurd amounts, even early in the game through the Mastery Over Time talent. Don't forget she also automatically debuffs the enemies, and you can combine Lidless Stare with her movement abilities for more damage. Now for a nerf to burst weapon attacks, a lot of items and abilities that provided flat bonuses to damage to each shot of burst attacks will now provide percentage bonuses instead, to reduce absurdly powerful multiplication in the end game. Okay, so flat bonuses in Rogue Trader are usually better than percentage bonuses because there's loads and loads of percentage bonuses, not so much when it comes to flat bonuses. And well, flat bonuses are what gets multiplied by the percentage bonus, so the higher the base amount, the higher the end result. As far as I've tested, this doesn't really make that much of a difference. You can still get hundreds worth of burst damage per each individual bullet fired later in the game, except you'll be having what, 16 to 20 bursts per single attack. It's still crazy powerful. Now let's cover a direct nerf to enemies for once. Enemies across the game have had their stats rebalanced, especially perception and agility, which reduces their initiative, great. The faster you can act with your characters, the better. And also their dodge and even accuracy with ranged attacks, leading to dodge becoming more viable. I believe they mean dodge tanks for the player character. Honestly, dodge tanking was pretty viable before. You could still get loads and loads of dodge percentage, even in Act 1 still. But I guess it's just even better now. The enemy's toughness, on the other hand, has been slightly increased, which I find very boring, because on Unfair, enemies already have 80% extra hit points. That's close to double the base amount. But Cassia can still easily debuff them into submission. Enemies also have a nerf to their dodge reduction, armor penetration, and parry reduction bonuses, depending on their difficulty rank. For a very interesting buff, however, Intelligence, the stat, will now also grant bonus damage to area of effect attacks of ranged weapons. Soldier now also has a new talent, Battlefield Demolition, which lets you use your demolition skill instead of intelligence for calculating the extra AoE damage, so Flamethrower and Melta builds are even better. I don't think it's gonna be as good as Burst, but what is? We also have another stat buff, as Strength will now increase the damage of all one-handed melee weapons by 5% per bonus instead of the flat +1. This will then be doubled for all two-handed weapons, so that's 10% extra damage per Strength bonus. Definitely a welcome change, because Strength before was pretty much one of the worst stats in the game. Space Marines have also received buffs in this patch. They now have a +10 to their base Fellowship, Willpower, and Intelligence, and even a +15 to their Perception. Speaking about Space Marine, all the Astartes weapons have received a very nice bonus to damage and improvements to other stats and effects. Once again, a welcome change, because Space Marines in this game, well, despite the fact they're supposed to be very powerful in the lore, they had extremely limiting gear choices before. So they ended up being worse than the classic normal human characters. They also have more hit points and can even act as cover for allies, which is very fun and interesting. Pasqal the Tech Priest has also been buffed in this patch. He's always been one of the best party members and is now even better, as his special Tech Priest talents can also be picked during normal level ups. This does matter because before, unlike Cassia, he could only pick his special talents in the same levels that you would get special archetype talents like from Operative. So it's much better to be able to replace a common talents choice for a special one, just like Cassia. While these were classified as the biggest changes by the developers, we still have a lot more ground to cover, so let's get into that now, the minor changes that is. For starters, we have a big buff to Abelard, the main tank companion, as he now starts with heavy armor proficiency, and even base heavy armor. Heavy armor is way better for the type of character Abelard is, a toughness tank. For a Pyromancer buff, its Backdraft unique talent now deals direct damage instead of fire damage, which of course means it will ignore armor and other damage reduction sources. Not so sure if it's gonna be worth the fact it won't scale off most bonuses anymore, because you can really stack stuff to huge amounts in this game. Oh, this one is very good, as we have a buff to Soldier, so our goddess Argenta, critical damage bonus and critical hit chance bonus from the Revelwing Slaughter ability did not stack. Now it's been fixed and is stacking, considering how many times you can easily buff your Soldier with Revelwing Slaughter by just killing enemies again and again. This is a very powerful change. Well, not really a change because it's just fixing a bug, but you know what I mean. Also, while I'm not covering a lot of the changes here, as you can see, we got a lot of bug fixes to already existing talents. We actually still have another huge officer nerf, as their best finest hour upgrade number 4, has been completely changed. Instead of providing you with more action points whenever killing an enemy, which of course could loop back into making lots of attacks, now it will make all non-attack abilities cost 1 less AP during the additional round. Kinda disappointing in a way, and honestly a very big nerf to sniper builds, not so much for burst because you have so many attacks with just one action anyways. Oh, and look at this nerf, Lightning Arc was dealing 1 more damage than it should have fixed. Oh no, the pain. And speaking about nerf, we also have a pretty big nerf to Pasqal Attack Priest, as his most powerful unique ability, Filtering Protocols, now only grants +1 AP to the first attack in the round, so no more massive Plasma and Melta spamming with Pasqal, I suppose. For another Pyromancer buff, the Rapid Fire Soldier ability can now be used for a Psyker staff with the Inferno ability. Pretty fun because you can already fire loads of, well, fireballs with Inferno. Now you'll get even more, for double the amount of course. This one is interesting, several abilities giving Resolve and Momentum had their scalings decreased. Honestly, as I said before, as early as the second act, you can still easily achieve high momentum turn 1. There's also some nerfs in a way for the Sanctic Psyker class. Shield of the Emperor, which is their main ability for extra defenses, now costs half the AP amount, which is great. But the armor percentage is also increased by half instead of the amount it was before. You can still get enormous resolve in this game though, so I don't think it's that much of a downgrade. The Hammer of the Emperor ability giving less damage bonuses, however, is kinda sad because it's only for a next single attack. The Soldier's Camaraderie ability no longer counts the soldier themselves as one of their allies, okay, but with a cross formation you can still acquire hundreds of extra percentage damage boost from this. Vanguard also has a buff, great for Abelard, as its Wall of Rock Crit and Defensive Stance abilities now cost half the AP. Quite a welcome change because Wall of Rock Crit is amazing for, well, taking less damage, and this also works for allies. Now let's cover some item changes, and the biggest one of them all is the fact the Elven companions, so Yrliet and Marazhai, can now equip a lot of items that were previously unavailable to them, including gloves and boots. If you've watched my builds for them, then you know it was kinda sad because they couldn't equip a lot of the best gear, so in a way, they were definitely outclassed by the human characters, just like the Space Marine party member. While there's a lot of changes here, they are mostly bug fixes for gear that didn't work as intended before. For a nice change, however, the Heavy Bolter can now be purchased even earlier, which of course means burst weapons are better even earlier. For another burst buff regarding items, the improved Heavy Bolter will finally increase the rate of fire after killing an enemy, and this by itself is, well, it's obscene to be fair, because you can already achieve enormous rate of fire in this game, but increasing it by +1 for each enemy killed, there's no words, you just destroy everything. And well, that's pretty much it for our biggest patch yet for Rogue Trader guide. If you found this video useful, as always, please remember to like, subscribe, and also consider becoming a channel member if you can. I highly appreciate your support. Thank you for watching, and see you next time, friends. With updated Rogue Trader builds, of course.